Have you ever wondered why the woman he cannot touch becomes the one he cannot forget? She is not the most beautiful, not the most kind, not the one who gives the most warmth. Yet her absence feels like a wound carved into his ego, a mirror that shows him everything he wishes not to see. He cannot name what draws him because it is not her body he desires. It is the silence that surrounds her. A silence that speaks of power, of choice, of the ability to vanish without explanation. She was not always like this. Once she reached out first. Once she waited for messages that never came. Once she believed that if she was soft enough, he would stay. But the more she gave, the more invisible she became. That is the first law of imbalance. The giver becomes the ghost. The one who bleeds becomes the offering. In her old life, she thought love was earned through effort. She mistook pleasing for connection, validation for affection. She lowered her voice, softened her gaze, restrained her fire so she would not frighten him. But the man's ego feeds on submission the way a starving beast feeds on weakness. It devours and forgets. There is a moment sharp as glass when she saw it. His boredom, his indifference. The way his attention wandered not because she lacked beauty but because she had given him her power wrapped in kindness. He mistook her loyalty for lack of options. He mistook her empathy for dependency. That is when the shift began, quietly, without announcement. A woman who awakens from that illusion does not scream. She withdraws. She pulls her energy from the battlefield. The silence that follows is not emptiness. It is metamorphosis. In Jungian terms, it is the confrontation with the shadow, the moment when the repressed rage, grief, and knowing rise from the unconscious and burn through the mask of the good woman. Men sense this shift before she says a word. It's in her eyes, stripped of pleading, in her voice, where softness no longer hides fear. She has met her own darkness and no longer trembles before his. He feels it like cold metal against his pride. The same woman who once sought his approval now observes him like a distant experiment. This is where his fear begins. The male wound is ancient, fear of rejection, fear of insignificance, fear of losing control. Beneath his confidence lies a trembling question. What if she doesn't need me? What if my power only exists in her belief that I have it? Her silence becomes unbearable because it reveals his dependence on her attention. The female wound is equally ancient, fear of abandonment, fear of being too much, fear of being unloved unless she shrinks. She was trained to please, to soothe, to dim. Yet when she finally refuses, when she lets the silence stretch like a blade between them, she touches a deeper truth. She realizes the love she begged for was never love. It was validation disguised as intimacy. This is the birth of the dark feminine. Not the evil, not the cruel, but the unyielding. The archetype the world tried to bury. The witch, the siren, the shadow queen. She no longer begs to be understood. She no longer explains her choices. Her energy moves like a tide, measured, distant, magnetic. Men feel drawn, yet they do not know whether to worship or to flee. He insults her, perhaps. He tests her, searching for the familiar reaction, but she gives none. Her face remains calm, her tone colder than his arrogance. The lack of response fractures his illusion of control. He realizes too late that what he thought was dominance was dependence on her emotional labor. Now she has withdrawn it, and the silence becomes his mirror. He stumbles, trying to provoke, but her indifference disarms him more than anger ever could. She no longer participates in his projections. She refuses the role of savior, mother, or victim. Her power lies in her refusal to perform. The dark feminine does not chase, does not explain, does not plead. She simply observes the collapse of his mask and feels nothing. In that space, she becomes untouchable, not because she hides, but because she has mastered detachment. The Stoics would call it ataraxia, serene indifference to what is outside one's control. She no longer needs him to see her because she has seen herself. That recognition burns brighter than any affection he could offer. You listening to this have felt it too, the ache of giving too much, the humiliation of waiting for a man to remember your worth, the exhaustion of explaining your pain to someone who profits from your silence. That moment of awakening will come, and when it does, do not seek revenge. Seek distance. Withdraw with grace and let absence do what words cannot. Tonight, sit in silence. Do not justify. Do not beg for closure. Let your stillness become a storm. Let someone feel your absence like a funeral for their control. The untouchable woman does not need to prove she has power. Her power is proven by what she refuses to give energy to. The woman who reclaims herself becomes an enigma, half shadow, half light. She walks through the world with the calm of one who has already faced her own death and returned untouched. He will replay her silence in his mind like an unanswered question. The ego cannot digest rejection, especially when it arrives without spectacle. His mind will twist the memory, trying to label her as cold, broken, bitter, anything to preserve the illusion that he still matters. But beneath his words he trembles, because the truth gnaws at him. She saw through him, and she left without needing to be right. The man who cannot own his shadow fears the woman who has mastered hers. She mirrors his hidden insecurities, his fragility, his need to control. Her detachment is not cruelty, it is reflection. Jung called it the projection of the anima, the unconscious feminine image within a man that he cannot integrate. When he meets a woman who embodies that power, he confuses her with salvation. He chases her not out of love, but out of hunger for his own lost wholeness. He wants her to feel, to flinch, to fight back, because that would prove he still has power. Yet she doesn't. She simply observes. To her, his rage is transparent, a child's tantrum wearing a man's body. The more he tries to provoke, the deeper he exposes his wound. His accusations sound hollow against her stillness. There was a time she would have explained herself. She would have defended her worth, tried to convince him of her good intentions. But those days died quietly. She buried the need to be understood when she realized that understanding is a form of dependence. The truth does not require witness. In her silence, something ancient awakens. The archetype of the witch, the one who stands outside the tribe, feared because she answers to no one. Men called her dangerous because she could not be controlled. They called her mad because she did not beg. Yet beneath the myth, she is simply free. Freedom has a sound. It is the sound of footsteps walking away from validation. It is the silence that follows when she no longer explains why. He will search for her energy in other women, mistaking kindness for weakness, warmth for availability. But the taste will never be the same. Once a man has been seen by a woman who holds her shadow with pride, every lesser encounter feels counterfeit. He will crave the depth he once mocked, yet he will not find it in those who still perform softness for approval. And you, listening now, must understand this. Your softness was never the problem. Your craving for love was never the flaw. The mistake was giving your empathy to those who fed on it. The wound was not that you cared. It was that you believed care could substitute for self-respect. The woman who becomes untouchable does not kill her emotions, she disciplines them. She channels longing into silence, pain into clarity, loneliness into sovereignty. She learns that distance is not punishment, it is purification. The process of individuation demands sacrifice. Jung wrote that no one becomes conscious without pain. The dark feminine accepts this pain like baptism by fire. She watches her illusions burn, the fairy tales of being chosen, the delusion of being enough for someone who is empty inside. What remains is not bitterness. It is clarity so sharp it could slice marble. He cannot bear that clarity. It exposes him. He lives through projection, seeing himself in others, never within. Her stillness denies him that refuge. Without her emotional reflection, he must face himself, and that is the hell he's always run from. You see, this is why men chase women they cannot have, not because of mystery but because of mirror. The unattainable woman reflects the void inside him. Her distance awakens the archetype of pursuit, the ancient masculine instinct to conquer. Yet conquest requires vulnerability, and vulnerability threatens ego. So he circles her, unable to approach, addicted to the fantasy of possessing what he fears to face. Her silence becomes his obsession, her indifference his punishment. The woman who once sought permission now writes her own laws. She does not explain her choices to the uninitiated. Power demands solitude, and solitude terrifies the dependent. You too must learn this art. Stop narrating your worth to deaf ears. Stop teaching others how to value you. Do not announce your transformation. Withdraw quietly. Let your absence expose what your presence once concealed. When you no longer react, you reclaim the tempo of the game. Every word unspoken becomes an instrument of control. Every refusal becomes a mirror. Detachment is not lack of feeling, it is mastery over it. He will sense the change in your rhythm. The warmth once freely given now moves with precision. Your energy becomes selective. Your gaze no longer seeks connection, it measures it. That is when the dynamic reverses. The hunter becomes the haunted. This is the truth beneath attraction. It is Nev. About beauty. It is about power. And true power is invisible, subtle, psychological, cold. The woman who does not need attention becomes the gravitational center of every room she enters. Tonight, remember this. The silence you fear is the same silence that will make you magnetic. Do not chase, do not explain. Withdraw and let your energy recalibrate. Let the world feel the chill of your absence and call it mystery. He begins to dream of her. Not in color, not in warmth, but in fragments. The way she looked at him without pleading. The way her silence pressed against his ego like ice. In those dreams, he tries to speak, but no sound comes. Because power once lost cannot be begged back. It must be rebuilt. Yet his foundation was made of validation, and now that she has withdrawn it, his empire crumbles from within. Men like him do not fear abandonment, they fear irrelevance. He would rather be hated than forgotten. Her silence delivers the cruelest punishment, invisibility. He checks his phone. Nothing. He crafts a message, deletes it. He imagines her with another man, but the jealousy is hollow. What he truly fears is not replacement, it is erasure. The untouchable woman no longer exists as an object in his narrative. She becomes an archetype. She is no longer her. She is the symbol asterisk, the embodiment of everything his ego cannot conquer. She has transcended his story, and in doing so, he loses authorship of his own illusion. You might think this is revenge. It is not. This is balance, the pendulum returning to its rightful place. The energy once poured into pleasing now redirected into presence. The power once used to chase love now anchors her in solitude. The dark feminine archetype lives beyond sentiment. She does not need to be liked, she needs to be real. Her silence is the language of boundaries, her distance the geometry of self-respect. She does not play the emotional hostage game, where affection is currency and attention is ransom. She operates in a higher economy, energy, intention, consequence. He will call her intimidating, but what he truly means is unyielding. He will call her complicated, but what he truly means is uncontrollable. Men who live in ego seek women they can define, but she no longer fits any label. She has burned through every identity that once made her small. In myth, Medusa was not the monster they said she was. She was transformation embodied, the woman punished for her power. They feared her because she forced them to see the truth in their reflection. Every man who looked upon her saw his own corruption and turned to stone. That is the essence of the dark feminine, to reflect the male shadow so precisely that it destroys its illusion of dominance. Her presence awakens something primal in men, all mixed with fear, desire mixed with shame, because she operates from a frequency beyond approval. She does not flirt, she commands. Her gaze carries the weight of discernment, not hunger, and that terrifies those who rely on being needed to feel alive. He once thought she was replaceable. Now he realizes she was irreplicable. He cannot recreate her energy because it came from self-ownership, not performance. Every attempt to find her reflection in another woman fails because he was never addicted to her kindness. He was addicted to the feeling of being seen by someone who no longer needed him. And you, listening, remembering, awakening, must understand that this is the threshold, the point where pain becomes alchemy, where heartbreak turns into discipline. You do not heal by seeking love elsewhere. You heal by becoming whole enough to never need what broke you. Silence is your initiation. Each time you resist the urge to explain, you reclaim a piece of yourself. Each time you stop chasing validation, your energy sharpens. You begin to radiate a kind of quiet authority that words cannot imitate. That is the untouchable aura men cannot resist, not because it promises comfort, but because it promises nothing. Humans crave what they cannot define. The more distant you become, the more symbolic you appear. To him, you are no longer a person, you are an enigma. The mystery becomes his prison. He starts to replay every interaction, searching for meaning, dissecting the last moment you looked at him. But meaning has already dissolved. You are no longer in the same dimension of power. She walks differently now, each step measured not in hesitation but in awareness. She has learned that attention is a currency and she spends it sparingly. Her presence is deliberate, her absence strategic. She has no desire to prove. She observes the world like a queen who no longer needs the crown to rule. This is not detachment born of pain, it is transcendence through it, emotional minimalism. The Stoics knew this long before psychology named it. What you do not react to, you rule. What you can walk away from, you own. You must practice this in silence. Do not announce your evolution. True shift happens when you stop seeking witnesses. Transformation that demands recognition is still performance. But the woman who disappears to rebuild her throne returns not for revenge, but for reign. Her energy no longer fluctuates with the tides of external validation. She is centered in her own gravity. That is why men orbit her. They feel the pull, not because she promises safety, but because she mirrors their potential. If only they could face themselves without running. Tonight, do not speak, do not post, do not prove. Let the world feel the withdrawal of your attention. Let those who once took you for granted experience the famine of your energy. The silence of a woman who has learned restraint is louder than any declaration of power. And when you look in the mirror, do not search for the girl who once begged to be seen. She no longer exists. The woman before you is her evolution, cold, composed, complete. He will return, they always do, but not out of love, out of compulsion. The mind returns to what it cannot conquer. The ego circles the wound it cannot heal. He will test the silence again, sending messages dipped in nostalgia, pretending to remember her warmth. But beneath the surface lies a simple truth. He is not searching for her. He is searching for the version of himself that existed in her gaze. He wants the reflection back, the one that made him feel powerful, desirable, significant. Yet that mirror is gone. She shattered it when she stopped reacting. When she withdrew the emotional supply that sustained his illusion, she became the void he cannot fill. There is something exquisite about watching a man face his own emptiness, not with cruelty, but with detachment. The dark feminine does not chase and she does not console. She observes as the ego unravels. She does not need to punish him. His own mind will do it for her. Every unanswered message, every ignored attempt feeds the quiet chaos inside him. You must understand this dynamic through the lens of archetype, not emotion. The dark feminine is not mean. She is necessary. She represents the death of illusion, the shadow that forces integration. When she appears in a man's life, it is not to destroy him. It is to expose what he cannot yet face within himself. But to those who cling to ego, that exposure feels like annihilation. He will call it manipulation. He will call it cruelty. Yet in truth, she has done nothing but withdraw. It is the absence of her emotional labor that reveals the fragility of his identity. Without her energy to feed on, his sense of self disintegrates. That is the spiritual mathematics of detachment. In the language of Jung, this is the animus and anima at war. the masculine ego confronting the ungovernable feminine unconscious. She represents the unknown, the chaos he cannot map. That is why he alternates between craving her and resenting her. His conscious mind desires to dominate while his unconscious longs to merge. But she stands unmoved, refusing both conquest and surrender. This is the alchemy of polarity, attraction born from resistance. He cannot have her, yet he cannot forget her. She exists as a symbol of what he could become if he faced himself. But symbols cannot be possessed. They can only be understood, and few ever reach that level of consciousness. The woman who embodies this archetype carries an aura of inevitability. Her silence is not passive, it is deliberate. It is the stillness before transformation. The kind of stillness that unnerves those who equate chaos with passion. She is no longer available for emotional rehearsal. Every word, every glance is measured. Her restraint is her weapon. You must cultivate this. Power is not found in reaction. It is found in the ability to remain calm while others unravel. When you stop performing empathy for those who exploit it, your energy becomes scarce, and scarcity breeds value. He will try again, perhaps pretending not to care. Casual messages, subtle provocations. His tone will shift from arrogance to curiosity to desperation. The cycle is predictable. The wounded ego must seek resolution, but there will be none. Her silence is the final mirror, cold, unyielding, absolute. And beneath that silence, something deeper emerges, peace. The kind of peace that comes when the storm inside has burned itself out. She no longer carries resentment because resentment still implies attachment. The absence of emotion is not numbness, it is freedom. This is the stage of individuation, the merging of light and shadow, the end of polarity. She no longer defines herself through opposition to the masculine. She exists beyond it. Her energy is not rebellion, it is completion. He senses this and cannot name it. It feels like holiness and horror. She has transcended his language, his expectations, his projections. The power he once interpreted as defiance is simply neutrality now. There is nothing left to fight, and that is what breaks him most. You must Ren to embody this neutrality. It is not indifference, it is dominion. When your emotions serve you instead of enslaving you, no one can manipulate you again. That is the essence of the untouchable aura. It is not about control, it is about sovereignty. She moves through the world differently now. Men approach her, drawn by something they cannot articulate. But she no longer responds to flattery or charm or potential. She sees through the masks. The woman who has met her own darkness recognizes the unintegrated shadow in others instantly. Her intuition is precise, surgical. Her boundaries are sacred geometry, exact, uncompromising, beautiful. The untouchable woman is not cruel. She is clear. Her calm dismantles the performance of those who rely on chaos to feel alive. Her silence commands respect, not through fear, but through inevitability. Because once a woman has mastered the art of emotional withdrawal, she no longer participates in her own exploitation. And so she becomes the mirror men both desire and dread. To be near her is to confront one's truth. To lose her is to realize that love was never ownership, it was reflection. Tonight, let this truth settle like frost in your chest. Do not rush to melt it. Sit in it. Let it purge your illusions. Power is not something you take, it is something you reclaim by refusing to give it away. He will remember you not as a woman he lost, but as a silence he cannot escape. That is the mark of the untouchable feminine. She does not haunt through presence, but through the echo of what she withheld. The silence spreads, it becomes atmosphere. He breathes it in and it burns him from the inside out. He starts to mistake emptiness for her essence, as if her absence has possessed the air itself. That is the cruelest irony of the dark feminine. She no longer has to do anything. Her withdrawal becomes omnipresent. The more he tries to escape it, the deeper it follows him, because he is not haunted by her, but by the version of himself that she made visible. You see, when she walked away, she took nothing but her energy. Yet that energy was the architecture of his identity. Without it, he collapses into himself. This is the death every man fears, not physical but psychological. The annihilation of ego through exposure. Jung called it the night sea journey, the descent into the unconscious, where every illusion drowns. Her silence forced that descent. Her absence became initiation. And though he curses her name, somewhere deep within he knows she was never his punishment, she was his mirror, his teacher, his undoing. The dark feminine does not destroy men, she dissolves their illusions. She does not make them weak, she forces them to see where their strength was false. Her energy cuts through performance like a scalpel through rot. Those who can withstand her presence emerge transformed. Those who cannot crumble and blame her for their own collapse. He is learning the cost of projection. Every fantasy he cast upon her now turns back against him. The angel he adored becomes the witch he fears. The savior becomes the serpent. The polarity shifts not because she changed, but because he refused to see her as whole. When she stopped playing the role he wrote for her, his narrative lost its meaning. And you, if you have ever been accused of being too cold, too mysterious, too distant, know this. What they call coldness is often your refusal to perform emotional labor for the ungrateful. What they call mystery is your silence protecting your inner world. What they call distance is your evolution. The untouchable aura is not armor, it is awareness. She understands now that intimacy without respect is corrosion. She no longer bargains for love with vulnerability. She gives presence only to those who have earned it through integrity. Every word, every gesture carries weight. She knows the cost of energy, and she spends it like a queen, not a beggar. He still talks about her, of course. Not openly, but through patterns. Every new woman becomes a stage where he reenacts the same tragedy. He chases, conquers, grows bored, and wonders why it all feels empty. It's because the shadow remains unintegrated. He seeks the untouchable aura again, but in women who still need him. The illusion comforts him, but the hunger persists. You cannot save such a man. That is his path to walk. The dark feminine does not interfere with karma, she lets it complete its cycle. She has learned that detachment is not apathy, it is trust in the natural order. When you stop intervening in another's self-destruction, you honor their autonomy. Let them burn. You are not their water. And so she moves through the world quietly, almost invisibly, yet everywhere she goes, energy shifts. Conversations pause when she enters the room. Men look, but they do not approach too quickly. They sense the precision of her boundaries. Her aura says, come correct or not at all. There is no middle ground left. The paradox of her power is that it draws others closer even as she withdraws. Because true confidence does not seduce, it summons. Her indifference becomes gravity. The men who feel unworthy interpret it as danger. Those who have faced their shadows recognize it as sacred ground. She does not entertain either. She remains still, allowing only what aligns. This is what individuation looks like in the feminine form. Not rebellion, not bitterness, but equilibrium. She has merged her light and darkness into coherence. The maiden who once feared abandonment has become the sovereign who walks alone without loneliness. She belongs to herself. You must become this. The woman who no longer seeks validation because her existence is its own evidence. The woman who does not chase destiny because she embodies it. The woman whose silence speaks louder than confession, whose gaze humbles arrogance into honesty. When you master this state, you will notice the world rearranging itself around your energy. The people who once drained you will fall away without confrontation. The ones meant to remain will rise to your level without demand. This is not magic, it is psychological gravity. You attract what you believe you deserve. He will watch from afar, perhaps in silence, perhaps with regret, but it will not move her, for her story no longer revolves around the masculine wound. She is no longer defined by rejection, betrayal, or loss. Those were her initiations, not her identity. She has stepped beyond polarity into sovereignty. Her energy is not reactive, it is directive. Her silence is not emptiness, it is command. Her presence no longer pleads, it reigns. And this is how the dark feminine becomes mythic. She is not remembered for what she said, but for what she refused to say. Not for how she loved, but for how she withdrew. Men will write poems about her, songs about her, myths about her. Yet none will truly understand her because she does not exist for their understanding. She exists for her own becoming. The silence that once marked her pain now marks her power, and the world bows to the woman who no longer needs to be seen. The woman who knows her worth does not argue, she vanishes.